From ancient history to current times, women have played an invaluable role as much as men in the field of intelligence. Throughout our own particular history in the U.S., women have distinguished themselves collecting and facilitating essential information to inform decision makers, beginning with the War of Independence against the British Crown, during our own Civil War in the 19th century, through both World Wars, and into the 21st century, wherein women are serving as National Security Agency Director of Signals Intelligence, Central Intelligence Agency Chiefs of Station abroad at our overseas diplomatic missions, as Federal Bureau of Investigation's Assistant Director of Directorate of Intelligence, Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, or even in the chair of Director of National Intelligence. Welcome to Brungart Law's Lanyap, wherein we provide you a little extra perspective beyond the law through conversations with individuals from all walks of life. I'm Maurice Brungart, your host. I enjoy engaging with experienced, knowledgeable, and passionate individuals for the opportunity to forge the broaden and deepen understanding of the world through their perspectives. They offer insights into what makes for effective practices and policies, enabling productive decision-making in our own lives. The more we learn, the more likely we can avoid common pitfalls, become better versions of ourselves, and guide others towards the same. Today's guest that we'll be learning from is Ms. Ilka Rodriguez, who retired from the Central Intelligence Agency's Senior Intelligence Service and has been managing an organizational consultancy enterprise since then. Welcome to the program, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Maurice.
So, our listeners are, waiting to hear, how'd you enter the world of intelligence? Where were you before then? How'd you get started? Where did it all begin?
Well, I'm probably the least likely candidate for the intelligence community.
Why is that?
in that, I am the daughter of immigrants. My father was from Cuba, and my mother was from Colombia, and my brother was born in Colombia. So I was first born in the United States. So federal service wasn't necessarily on my radar. I did my undergraduate work at New York University, where I majored in French and German, and I grew up bilingual. I spoke Spanish at home. I had studied abroad twice at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid in Madrid and the Catholic Institute of Paris. And in my senior year at New York University, a classmate pointed out that CIA was having an information session at the Federal Building in downtown New York. Excuse me. And he said, Ilka, you'd be a shoo-in. You've studied abroad twice. You're a French and German major. You speak Spanish. You're a good student. Excuse me. So I'm going to go to the presentation. I suggest that you go too. And my first reaction was, oh, come on. A little Latina girl from suburban New Jersey. I commuted from New Jersey to New York. I couldn't afford the housing. And I had gotten partial academic scholarship and I had work studies. So I worked on campus at the International Student Center, actually, typing visa forms and answering phones and working with international students.
So you were already collecting information from the beginning.
I was already engaging in the intelligence business. Anyway, to make a long story short, he didn't show for the info session, and I did. I had gone home, as I did every night, home to mommy and papi, and I told them about this, and they said, whoa, CIA. And I said, I want to check it out. What do you think? And they said, you've got nothing to lose. So I went to the information session, and I was intrigued by the fact that they couldn't tell me so much about what I potentially would do with CIA. There was an entrance exam at the time that was almost like a GRE. And they said, we invite you to come and take the exam. It was a whole day affair. They actually administered it at Columbia University uptown. And so I went on a Saturday morning. My father, the buses and the trains weren't running from New Jersey at that time in the morning. So my father actually drove me into Columbia, and I sat for the exam. And then I was contacted saying, you did well in the exam, come to the federal building and talk to the recruiter.
I'm going to interject one moment. So, question.
Yeah.
Not to date you, obviously, but
Yeah.
what was the year approximately?
Oh, yeah. So I started the process with CIA in 1984.
Okay.
In the fall of 1984.
Okay, fall of 1984. So Ronald Reagan's president. We're in the
Yes.
Cold War, and
and there was a push for hiring at CIA at that time.
Okay, and
There's a lot of hiring.
And the exam itself, was this some multiple choice exam? What did it consist of at that time?
It was multiple choice. It had a psychological evaluation component to it. It was a fascinating test, actually. So that impressed me. That, given what they were asking me about. So I went to see the recruiter. And he said, I've got a couple of areas where I think you'd be a good candidate. I'd like you to, if you're interested, we'd like to fly you down to Washington and have you interview with these specific offices. Please don't tell anyone that you're applying to CIA. Please keep it under your hat. But we'd like to fly you down. And I went. And I interviewed for two offices. One it used to be called the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, which is now the open source center for the intelligence community. And these were the people that did all the translation and interpretation of open source intelligence. So obviously information that you can collect from the media, newspapers, broadcasts, what have you. So that was one interview. The other interview was with the Office of Technical Service, which is basically the Q shop in James Bond. This is the office that comes up with all the gadgetry to support the collection of intelligence. They didn't tell me too much about what I would be doing. They said, how's your memory? Do you like to travel? Have you traveled, etc.? And the open source entity said, well, we don't know if you're exactly a fit, but the Office of Technical Service said, we're going to offer you a job right now. It's obviously dependent on your ability to clear and to be medically cleared, security cleared, but we'd like to offer you a job. So, here I was, 21 years old. This was in April of 1985. So I was 2 months from graduation from NYU. And I said, I'll pursue this. And I
got to ask at this point. So once you had the job offer and, you're saying yes, at that moment when you said yes, what was going through your mind at that moment? Was it like, oh, this is really going to be fascinating? Or was it more of, holy cow, I'm actually entering into the intelligence business? What is this going to be like? I mean, was it?
It was both. It was both. I mean, I was intrigued by the fact that they couldn't tell me exactly what I would be doing. That fascinated me. They talked about the opportunity to travel. That I liked. And frankly, I had been living at home throughout college, and life in Manhattan was very expensive. And it was easier for me to become independent by moving to Washington. Able to have my own apartment and live, fairly well. I mean, it wasn't a high salary, but enough so that I could live on my own.
Did you have any initial hesitation? Because at that time, the CIA didn't necessarily have the most positive of associations with Latin America, and you
Yeah.
have parents from Latin America. Did any of that go through your mind and give you pause, or?
Um, Not really. I saw it as the opportunity to have an adventure, really, and to be involved in government service, which I thought about it and I thought, that would be pretty awesome to serve the government. And so I entered on duty in October of 1985. And they told me at my new employee orientation that I would be undercover. So that's why they had told me that I shouldn't tell anybody that I was applying to the CIA.
So at that point, you told your parents, "Oh, I didn't get the job. I'm going to be a postal worker."
No, they said you can tell your parents. And I said I'd like to tell my brother too. I'm very close to my brother. And like, okay, you can tell him, but that's it. I'm like, okay. So when I saw them, they said, now don't talk about this over the phone. I said, okay, I'll have to wait till I see them next, whether I was going to go to New Jersey or they were going to come to Virginia to see me. And then, I told them in person. I said, look, it's like this. I can't publicly acknowledge my affiliation with CIA. And they're like, oh my God, how does that work? I said, yeah. I'm like, okay, so what do you say? I said, this is my cover story. And I had a cover story, not so defined. I had an official job title and an official organization that I belonged to. All my pay stubs said it. But as far as talking about what I did, I had to kind of invent that on my own.
You had to become a storyteller.
I had to become a storyteller, and they also basically said, you want to sound as boring as possible because you don't want people to want to know more about what you do. So really make it sound very pedestrian. And I did.
I won't ask what it was because again, I want to make sure we also maintain a certain sense of integrity, even if it's a few decades ago. But in terms of your preparation that they gave you and your colleagues at that time, classmates, training mates, and then your transition into your first assignment, at that time, demographically, what was your group like?
Very young. A lot of recent college graduates, because again, at this point, CIA was doing a lot of hiring because it had been, the workforce had been depleted a few years back, and it was now rehiring and re-upping the number of employees. So young, not a lot of Latinos. I was the only Latina in my unit. as far as the woman to man mix, it was mostly men. Yeah, but uh, you know, a number of us were young women coming on board.
But you were
And
the only Hispanic
Latina,
at the time.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And I began. I was basically involved in disguise and alias documentation. So I was an authenticator. I helped make fake passports look real.
This makes me think of the movie Argo and the.
Exactly. Well, so there you go. So Tony Mendez, who was the protagonist in Argo, was my supervisor's boss. So I worked for Tony Mendez.
Wow.
Yeah.
What
Interesting guy.
What impressed you from your work with him?
Well, he was good at what he did. He was very creative as far as the forging business and the operations planning business. He was, he did a very brave thing when he was involved in the rescue of the hostages out of Iran. He was an okay supervisor. Not actually. One of the reasons that I became interested in later in being a manager, because I didn't think Tony was the strongest manager. He was a fabulous individual contributor. Fabulous. Yes. Fabulous. But I don't think he was the strongest manager or leader.
And in terms of the training, as we talk about supervision and leading, did they inculcate from the very beginning management and leadership principles, or did that come more or less later?
Well, I think we were taught from the very beginning that we should lead from where we sat, that we should look for leadership opportunities by going the extra mile, volunteering when needed, being a thought leader, speaking truth to power. Those were all things that were encouraged.
Interesting. I like how you, if that was the actual expression back then I'm stealing that. I've documented it. Leading from where you sit.
Yeah.
That actually resonates a bit with me from having read a few months ago a not so important woman, the story about Virginia Hall.
Yes.
Who worked for the Brits, the Office of Executive
OSS.
Service, and then OSS with the Americans, because she truly led from where she sat. Working in France, in Nazi-controlled territory. Mm-hmm. So, if anything exemplifies that,
she's definitely revered at CIA.
Were there studies that were incorporated from her experiences into your training?
Yes, okay. Absolutely, yes.
And as you started in your career and are transitioning after a few years into the next assignment, what were some of the initial challenges and obstacles you encountered? One, simply as a part of the intelligence community, whatever those challenges or obstacles were. And then perhaps, if there were any that were specific to you being not only a woman, but a Latina.
Well, I think that as a woman, I felt like I had to be better than the best. I did encounter men who were less than enlightened as far as having female colleagues. As a Latina, um, I encountered some ignorance. For example, uh, during my first week on the job, I actually had someone ask me if I was a U.S. citizen. And because my last name was Rodriguez. And I thought about it and I stopped. And my mother always taught me when it came to dealing with people who were less than knowledgeable about the diversity in Latinos and what the Latino experience is, she always said, look for the opportunity to educate. Don't be nasty. Show some patience and see it as an opportunity to educate. So when this guy asked me if I was a U.S. citizen, I decided to have a little joke. I said, you know what? Last time I checked, New Jersey was part of the Union. And he said, what? I said, I was born in Teaneck, New Jersey. So I said, number one. Number two, you have to be a U.S. citizen to work at the CIA.
And how did he respond?
He was a little dumbfounded. So
put his hands in his pockets and turned around and walked away?
Basically. Yeah. And you know, I had colleagues, other Hispanic colleagues that you know, I enjoyed speaking Spanish to. And you know, a couple of times, oh, you speak English, you know, this is America. And I'm like, oh, please give me a break. I said, you're just jealous because you can't speak another language, you know, type thing. So yeah, I encountered some ignorance. I did, but that wasn't new for me. I had experienced that growing up.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything new. But the other thing that I, you know, talk about lead from where you sit. I eventually left the Q business. I decided to take a rotation, you know, a temporary assignment, doing something else. I had an experience where I had been, it had been questioned whether I was qualified to take an overseas assignment. I had done a 3-month stint at one of OTS's overseas locations. And the chief of the base said, wow, she's great. So-and-so is leaving the base to return to the United States next year. This is the gal that needs to replace him. And so they got ready to draft a communication, a cable to the field saying, this is our candidate. And it was stopped in the front office by, actually, I don't mind saying, by Tony Mendez.
Okay.
And he said that, Ilka, I'm not so sure. We should have a bake-off, as he called it. You know, a test. And we should have other people be thrown into the mix. And I said, you know, that's kind of BS. I've never heard of that being done. But I wasn't part of his inner circle. He did play favorites, and I wasn't part of the chosen. So I wasn't surprised by that. And I actually went to the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity. And I said, hey, this is what's happening to me. is this discrimination? What is this? Because I've never known of anyone who the chief of base said, I want this person, that would ever be called into question. Why is it being called into question now? And the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity said, well, they have the prerogative to screen people the way they want to screen them. If you file a complaint, it's going to take a long time to resolve. And, what do you want out of all this? And I said, fair treatment. And they said, well, at this point, either you take the test or you don't. And I thought about it and I said, you know what? I'm going to take the test. Because the one good thing about the test is that you had to produce a piece of spycraft for this test. And there was going to be a blind rating of the product. So I thought, well, at least it's a blind rating. And so I took the test with 5 other people, and they came back to me and they said, you won. You passed the test. Yours was the best. And I thought, oh, okay. So we're going to send the nomination cable out. Okay. And I said, not so fast. I said, let me think about this. And I said to myself, do I want to go overseas and be reporting to this chain of command back at headquarters? Is this the organization I want to belong to? Is this the leadership I want to report to? And, it was mostly married people at the base. So, my social life I don't think was going to be wonderful. I would have had a tremendous opportunity to go to all over the region. And I had been to some countries in that region when I spent the summer there. And I decided I didn't want to take the assignment. And they said, you've lost your head. You're throwing away your career. Why? And I said, you know what? If this is going to end my career, then so be it. And at that point, I actually went back to NYU and I talked to my German department advisor, Dr. Becker. And I said, hey, are you interested in having me come back as a graduate student? Could you see me teaching, being a teaching assistant? And they're like, oh my God, yeah, you'd be awesome. And he said, but is that the only place you can work in the organization that you belong to? Because I told him the story. He says, don't give up so easily. He said, why don't you check some other options out? And I thought, wow. So I decided to go on some informational interviews. And one of them was with the recruitment function. And they said, we looked into your interest. We've seen your file. You're very well thought of. The agency at the time used to have regional recruitment offices. The Boston recruiter position is open. If you're interested, we would love to have you consider it. And I said, I don't want to relocate to Boston. I said, but if other opportunities come up, please let me know. And I got a phone call from a Latina. Her maiden name was Rodriguez, a Texan. She's a Texan. And she said, you know, the agency has not done well as far as recruiting minorities. And we're putting together a task force. And we want to target the Latino community. And the head of recruitment who met with you thinks very highly of you and thinks that you would be a great member of this task force.
If I may ask,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can't say, I understand, but what was now the time frame of this, the year?
Yes. So this was 19, let me think, 1989.
Okay.
So 4 years in. And I went on this task force and I was still undercover. So I had to use an alias as far as representing the agency with universities and professional associations and what have you.
Oh my God, Ilka, you were lying to students.
Yes. Yes, I was. And I really loved it. I loved recruiting. And I did very well as far as building relationships with Latino serving organizations and Hispanic serving institutions of learning, of higher learning.
Well, I'll interrupt you at this point. So, when you're looking at someone who approaches that table, you know, you have your setup and maybe a trifold behind you and whatnot. Were you specifically looking for certain traits that someone, as they approached, would engage you? Anything it would be, you know, someone who looks you in the eye, or you know, their posture, or did you just take people as they came and just kind of made a note of, you know, generally how they were?
So I talked to whoever approached me, obviously. I took their, you know, we were still dealing in paper resumes back then. I always politely took their resume, but I made notes on each resume. And I commented on some of the things that you mentioned. Their ability to be articulate, their ability to tell me why they specifically were interested in CIA. I was looking for certain grade point averages. The agency preferred people to have at least a 3.0 overall, at least, with potentially higher GPAs in their major, in their areas of major, in their major areas of study. I was looking for a person who had the ability to engage, good interpersonal skills. So I just put my notes on every resume. You know, I'd say worth taking a look at. Or if they weren't appealing, I'd say don't see a fit. This is why. So I made some judgment calls right there at the recruitment booth.
Were you alone, or were you partnered with someone?
I was usually partnered with at least one other person.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in your experiences recruiting initially, folks that would approach, did you find that most of them were men or women approaching? I mean, did you pick up on any kind of trends at that time? Or, oh, all the women just come talk to me and all the men just go talk to the other individual? Or did it seem, you know, 50-50?
It seemed pretty even.
Okay.
It seemed pretty even. Yeah.
No, and I only ask in the sense it's just trying to see society at that time through your lens, and also perhaps how society was perceiving you at that time.
Well, you know, I think when we went to events at Hispanic serving institutions or organizations, the young people appreciated the fact that I was Latina. And they always asked me, how did you end up at CIA? And, I tell them the story. Uh, and do you have relatives abroad? Can you keep in contact with them? What restrictions does the agency put on you as far as keeping in touch with your relatives in Colombia or Cuba? And I said, the agency requires you to report on close and continuing contact with people who live overseas. I said, I've got a big family in Colombia. I said, but I don't keep in touch with everybody, but I do keep in touch with some of them, and I've reported them. As far as Cuba, I really don't have any contacts with family in Cuba. I have family in Cuba, and when I applied, I had to say that I had an uncle in Cuba and I had cousins in Cuba. But I said, the other thing is, if you go overseas for pleasure travel, you've got to ask for permission. I mean, you've basically got to give your itinerary to the agency, and they have to determine whether there are any counterintelligence concerns, safety concerns with where you want to go. I said, yeah, but I don't see that as a burden. That level of reporting was not burdensome for me. It was just a condition of employment.
Did you get feedback from those that ended up entering the service pursuant to their encounter with you? And did you have, or did the agency have sort of a validation method that they could then go back to the initial recruiter and give you feedback regarding people? It's like, hey, because of you, we have this individual, or did that not exist at the time?
That did not exist at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as you're enjoying this process of meeting people, trying to identify the right folks to join the intelligence community, tell us what happened after that, as you progressed up the ladder, because it sounds like you sort of stayed in the human resources realm, in the human capital realm.
I did. One of the other things I did at the time, which I think the listeners will find interesting, is that we were seeing this. The agency was seeing some retention challenges with Latinos. We were recruiting them, but some of them were not staying. And so we started taking a look at why that might be. And some of them were feeling isolated. They had come from communities with a significant Latino population. And then they came into the agency and they were the only Latino in their unit. And they felt lonely. And they wanted to connect with other Latinos, but didn't know how to do that. So we had a grassroots effort, and we established an employee resource group called the Hispanic Advisory Council. And at first, when we were selling it to leadership, senior leadership, they said, it's just an excuse for you Latinos to get together and party and da-da-da-da-da. And we said, no, it's about the mission. We're having some retention issues, and we want to be pairs of hands for the agency. We want to be resources to these people coming in and saying, come, let me tell you about my agency experience. Your parents were from Colombia? My mom was from Colombia. You speak Spanish? I speak Spanish. You have a crappy boss? Let's talk about it. Let us coach you through that. Let us be mentors to you. Let us show you how to manage up. So it was a very powerful tool for the agency, I think, as far as the development and the retention of the workforce. And it's frankly one of my proudest accomplishments at CIA.
How would you respond to someone who would potentially ask the question, well, maybe people just needed to get over it, sort of a contrarian view, or well, they need to integrate better because they're no longer, Latino. They're part of now the agency, and we need to put all that aside. Or that one is, engaged in too much hand holding, whatever it
Uh-huh.
is. How would you respond to say just,
Yeah.
that this is going overboard? And this would be applicable to obviously other ethnicities,
Uh-huh. Sure.
gender, what have you, in the agency and government at large.
We basically said um, it's it's something to help the organization retain talent. So what if people need a little bit of a helping hand? We're not going to baby them. We're going to tell them what it's like. In some cases, Maurice, I had people coming to me saying, "I know I'm being discriminated against." Da, 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 da. I said, and I would say, "Let me see your performance evaluations." And they'd give me their performance evaluations. I said, "I got news for you. You're not cutting it. Your performance evaluations are telling me that there are some performance gaps when it comes to your ability to be an agency officer. So, no, they're not picking on you because you're Latino. They're saying you're not meeting the standard."
And how would
And
people respond to that?
some of them said, "Wow." Some of them said, "Gee, thanks for your candor." In some cases, they say, "Oh, you've already made it, so you don't really care. You're one of them. You're white now." And I said, "You know what? I'm very proud to be Latina. And I'm the daughter of immigrants." I said, "But fair is fair. You gotta be able to step it up, and you're not stepping it up. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you." There you go.
And did you get some kind of affirmation or, I don't want to say validation in the sense, oh, good job,
Mm.
Miss Rodriguez, but more, did the organization come back and tell you, hey, you're onto something here?
I think that I was given opportunities to lead because I rose to the occasion when I was not even in an official leadership position.
Huh. Let me
I
let me attack that one comment there because something we had in our own training when I did work for the government, and I want you to incorporate this into what you just said. You don't rise to your level of occasion; you default to your level of preparation. And
mm,
so, what do you think, and whether it's your experience training with the agency or even
mm,
your own upbringing that
mhm.
allowed you to actually default to a level of preparation to meet the occasion?
Well, my parents were very good leaders in their own right. When my parents emigrated from Colombia, they were there weren't too many Colombians in Hackensack, New Jersey. That's my hometown. And my parents were very astute as far as becoming part of the community. My dad immediately started coaching Little League. His English was not terrible, but not the best. And my dad was given the teams with the minority kids, and they'd say, "Good luck." And he brought them to championships on several occasions.
Awesome.
And my mother worked outside the home when she immigrated from Colombia. Um, she She was a leader in her family. She was the oldest of 7, lost her mother when she was 14. So she was used to taking the helm of things. So that's what I saw at home, number one. The other thing is I've always been known for my compassionate candor. I've never shied away from saying, hey, look, I see some issues here. Now, I say compassionate candor because unfortunately, I had seen people who destroyed egos when giving performance feedback, and that's so unnecessary. You don't have to do that. That's not leadership behavior in my book. So I never shied away from taking on the tough conversations with people. I mean, I started doing that in the Hispanic Advisory Council when I wasn't even an official supervisor. And people saw that in me. And I also was very good at looking for mentors. I tried to identify people I could learn from and people who I knew would tell me the truth. So I was very networked very early on in my career.
Did you find in these moments when you are giving guidance to whomever, or when you know you are in a moment you have to approach someone about a particular issue, and there's a lot over the years that's come out about how to deal with problems and conflict and whatnot, and is it a performance issue, is it a conduct issue? And this spans the spectrum of whether it could be personal relationships, romantic relationships, or the workplace, professional relationships, whatnot. But in talking to a friend the other day, I think there also comes a point. Yeah, generally you want to be able to communicate and engage with folks. But do you find there also sometimes it's like communicating ain't going to help because there are just some things the person should already see. As an example, it's an oversimplification. 3 folks sharing an apartment or a house. And when the trash is full, it's always 2 of them taking it out, right? Not the third person. And at that case, okay, well, hey, we got to go talk to, person number 3. But it's almost like, but why? Why do you need to go talk to person number 3? The others have figured it out. So did you find over the course of your intelligence career, working in government, that there are moments that, communicating ain't going to help because the person they don't see it. I mean, there are just some things that are blatantly obvious. And that person, if my colleague, if whoever is, seeing the same thing and doing something about it, but that person isn't, communication really ain't going to help. Do you?
I mean, I was a firm believer and a very good practitioner as far as delivering the message, saying, I see the gap, conversation. I'm going to give you the opportunity to turn this around. I'll coach you, but you're going to have to turn this around. Okay, so they don't turn it around. Okay, so I'm going to start documenting these gaps in performance. So I'm going to start writing memoranda for the record. Okay. So no change in performance. Okay. So now we're going to do a performance improvement plan.
A PIP.
A PIP. And you're going to have X amount of time to rectify this. If you're unable to rectify this, then we might have to start talking about separation.
And speaking of the documentation process,
Mm.
I know from my experiences in the Department of State, unfortunately, the evaluation process and the moments where you're supposed to engage in the counseling session, you go over the good, the bad, strengths, areas for improvement. Unfortunately, it was almost sort of going through the motions at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember as when I had among my supervisory assignments, and I'd walk the agents through the exercise, and I'd tell them, I'd say, look, we have two choices as we're doing this, and this is like the counseling session that eventually will lead to the final evaluation.
Yeah.
We can treat this as just a paper exercise. We can check the box, and this will last, 2 minutes, and you'll be on your merry way.
Mm.
Or we take this paper exercise and we avail ourselves of the opportunity to actually use it for what it's intended for. Even if it's got its own limitations and its faults, what have you, this is what we
Mm-hmm.
have, and let's sit down and do this. And we would do that. Granted, I'm sure I made my own mistakes, and I'm definitely open to that. But I did find a lot of times in the evaluation process, too many people just took it as, going through the motions. Was this some of your experience as well, that people really would not take advantage of the administrative responsibility as a means to turn it into true engagement and the moment to influence and motivate?
I think that the agency worked very diligently at having people take ownership for what went into their performance evaluations. They would have to document their accomplishments. They would have to tell their stories. Then the supervisor would have to say, actually, this is that. So, performance evaluation report time was a very busy time at CIA, and it was taken very seriously. And the challenge, though, was that some supervisors were hesitant to be as candid as they needed to be. We used to say always, don't let the performance evaluation report be a surprise to the employee.
Hmm.
In other words, they can't be hearing about this gap for the first time when it's performance evaluation time. Your responsibility as a supervisor is to address it as soon as it arises, have them aware. If they're unable to rectify it, or if they are not accepting of the feedback, then that, of course, has to go into the performance evaluation report. But they can't hear the hard news for the first time in the performance evaluation report.
So, from your experience, personnel operations and procedures, processes, they were definitely a fundamental aspect of the career at the agency.
Definitely. The panels, the annual performance evaluation panels that were conducted. When I was there, they always made sure that there was a diversity advocate on the panel. In other words, a person of color, a minority, who would ensure that discussions about candidates, about officers, were fair and equitable. And I was a very good panelist. And because when I rose to the executive ranks, there were less of us, I was very busy serving on performance evaluation panels and employee selection panels when people applied to vacancies in the agency. Those things were taken very seriously. And in order to serve on a performance evaluation annual review panel, you had to do a lot of homework as a panelist, reading those performance evaluations, going back and reading the previous evaluations, taking a look at trends in performance, doing an executive summary because you were assigned people to represent on the panel. You had to do executive summaries for the panel on what the strengths and areas for development of the candidates were and whether they should be promoted, because promotion at CIA is like the military. It's all competitive. I was a GS-15 in a senior intelligence service position. I served in several senior intelligence service positions before I got promoted because I had to compete with other people trying to get promoted, and I had to be recommended and everything. So, if you applied as a GS-14 to a GS-15 position, you did not get an automatic promotion. You had to compete.
Speaking of the promotions and your rise through the ranks, and as you mentioned, that there were very few women and Latinas at that time, so you were busy serving on some of these panels.
Yes.
Demographically, I take it, and from the literature that I've seen available, open source, the agency and the intelligence community in general has become more diversified. But if you could take a brief moment to comment on that, the balance between, diversity of the type of individual that's there, from gender, ethnicity, race, religion, to, are we overdoing it? Are we placing too much emphasis on the diversity, or have we done too much of that? Because obviously, and especially in the past few years, in our country, there's been a lot of examination and criticism of that process. But again, whether one's right or wrong, just how do you respond to it from your perspective?
Well, as a person who served undercover overseas and served in some denied areas, so areas where it was extremely dangerous to operate, I saw the value that I brought to the work as a Latina and as a woman. I was able to do things as a woman and as a Latina that my non-Latino colleagues were unable to do. My looks helped me. My language skills helped me. My growing up biculturally helped me. As a woman, I was less suspicious than my male counterparts. So I was able to do some dicey things because I was seen as less suspicious.
As less of a threat.
Less of a threat. And I think women are so skilled at the intelligence collection and analysis business. I think we read people very well. I think women, again, in many countries, our gender is an advantage because we're, quote unquote, less suspicious. As I said, I mean, I walked the streets of cities that were very hostile to Americans. And I didn't look, quote unquote, American, or whatever the stereotype of being American is. I got away with a lot, actually. I could have been arrested for things that I did in the field. But, I was young and I felt invincible. And I took very calculated risks. So I think that having a diverse workforce is good for business when it comes to the intelligence game.
How have you seen the overall community mature in this regard?
I think that certainly when I was there, the intelligence community was introspective about its makeup. And it made some conscious efforts to ensure that it was reaching out to diverse communities, that it was educating people about the opportunities in the intelligence community, people that normally would not know about the intelligence community. So I saw the rise. I mean, when I was, my last position was the chief foreign language strategist of the agency. And I was responsible for managing the language incentive program, which was a pay bonus program for people with language proficiency. I was responsible for tracking the development of proficiency in the agency and reporting to the director of the agency every quarter on how we were doing as far as the growth and retention of our language proficiency. And when I was in that position, Gina Haspel, the first female director of CIA, was the director. And Gina Haspel, almost all of the heads of the directorates, which, the big divisions at CIA, almost all of them were women. I had never seen that in my career. And Gina Haspel was such an incredible leader. She was homegrown, so she wasn't someone who came from the outside. Trump appointed her in his first administration, and she was one of us. And that made a huge impact on how women saw their ability to rise in the ranks. And she was very deliberate about putting women in senior leadership positions. And she was very unapologetic about it. Now, these women were eminently qualified. They weren't, quote unquote, as is said today, diversity hires. These women had the chops. But she did a lot for women. To me, that was the zenith of my time at CIA. When I saw a female director, a homegrown female director of the agency, and many of her senior leaders be women.
What was something you believe that Gina excelled at in terms of leadership, leading people, and management in terms of managing programs?
So I think Gina, first and foremost, was an effective communicator. She was very direct, but put things in a very hearable way. She called out deficiencies, but she called them out in a very hearable way, number one. Number two, she listened to the people that reported out to her. I mean, I remember, so we had the chief foreign language officer, and then I was the chief foreign language strategist. So this woman, another woman, an Asian, actually, another minority, she and I would brief Gina every quarter. And she was so great at building rapport. We would come in, she goes, "Oh, my language girls," or, something like that. She asked for our opinion. She always knew, she asked great questions. She never accepted the status quo. I mean, when we decided, when she said our language incentive program is broken, in that we're paying people for proficiency and we're not leveraging that proficiency. We're spending too much money and we're not getting enough return on investment. When she made that decision, that was put in my hands. And I had to fix the language incentive program. And let me tell you, Maurice, I wasn't the most popular person at CIA, because I basically had to tell people, we're not going to pay you for that language anymore, because you're not using it. We don't need it. And we're going to give more money to people who actually work at maintaining their proficiency. And let me tell you, I made a lot of enemies. There was, so much upheaval over that. But I had total top cover from Gina. Total top cover.
As you reflect on your interactions with Gina, directly and indirectly, her style leading the agency, your own times as a leader and a manager, as well as a subordinate, and others that you were reporting to, what would you describe in terms of traits representative of the most successful of leaders, decision makers, and how do you measure that success?
Well, I think above all, the most impressive leaders that I worked for were people who understood the business that they were overseeing, took swift action as far as addressing inadequate performance, people who built relationships with their direct reports, understood that relationship building was a tool for success. It wasn't some moral good, or, it was just good business.
It's the reality.
Yeah, to build relationships. People who were unafraid to call out deficiencies of the organization. People who didn't roll over when superiors said, "Oh, it's X." Well, no, actually it's Y. With all due respect, sir, madam, it's Y. And let me tell you. So people who spoke truth to power, and people who understood that you have to manage well in order to lead well. That it's not so separate. People say, "Oh, I'm a manager, I'm a leader." Not so much.
They're two opposite sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I once heard someone say, management is knowing what ladder to put at the wall,
Yes,
and leadership is knowing whether you need the ladder to begin with.
that's right. Absolutely.
Are there any misconceptions that you'd like to perhaps clarify for the audience when it comes to the intelligence community that you've encountered over your time, whether it's in the press or directly?
First and foremost, the members of the intelligence community are civil servants. They are here to serve the nation. So it's about service, number one. Number two, we don't do things willy-nilly, or we're not rogues. We inform the president and the policymakers of what's going on, but they make the decisions about what actions the government takes. At one point, certainly at CIA, we had some rogue behavior many, many years ago. Watergate changed everything. The oversight of the intelligence community is notable as compared to what other foreign intelligence services undergo. We're under the microscope in the intelligence community, but we don't do things without the approbation of the president and his cabinet. Number one. Number two. I think the other thing is, here's a statistic for you. 1 in 15 applicants to Harvard get in. 1 in 200 applicants to Google get in. 1 in 1,500 applicants to CIA get in. It tells you a little bit about the caliber of the workforce. It was a privilege to serve alongside some of my colleagues. I worked with some brilliant people who had tremendous integrity, tremendous patriotism. I may sound like a snob, but we were the creme de la creme. We are la creme de la creme. So whenever I hear this diversity hire and all that crap, I'm like, oh my gosh. No. It's hard to get into the intelligence community. It's challenging, and it should be, given the responsibility that it carries. So I feel very proud of having been among those those ranks, and as the first Latina in HR to be promoted to the Senior Intelligence Service, I'm very proud of that accomplishment. Very proud.
Any parting thoughts you'd like to share with the audience? Keeping in mind, there are members of the IC probably in there, members of the State Department, and then just the private sector, people who are, running their own business, who are serving the disadvantaged, but it's their tax dollars that are, allowing for government workers to be out in the field. Regardless, any parting thoughts you'd like the audience to be aware of from what you've learned over a career in the intelligence community, a career where you've had to make personal sacrifices, where you've achieved positions of leadership? What comes to mind?
I would say that the intelligence community is filled with talented patriots who go to work every day with an incredible desire to serve our nation and to protect it from harm. And I think that's a very noble cause. Not for everyone, I understand. But when I think of what I learned working for CIA, frankly, I have a personal and organizational development consulting firm now. And I'm working with actually a nonprofit. And I'm basically coaching the CEO and founder. And I'm going to be doing some organizational development work for her. And I think about the experience that I'm bringing to the table and, the development I got. I mean, the agency invested in me. The agency sent me to Harvard for a week. I mean, I had so many opportunities. The agency paid for my master's degree, lock, stock, and barrel. I had so many development opportunities in the agency. And now when I see the work that I have to do with this nonprofit, I'm thinking, wow, I can't believe they don't know how to do this. Or they don't have a process to do this. I think, wow, I learned quite a bit. But, out of my 36 years with CIA, 29 of them were spent in leadership. So I know that I bring a lot to bear. And I still have a strong sense of service. And, I'm not looking to be a millionaire. But it's nice to be able to apply all my experience and my knowledge to do more good in society. So the agency prepared me so well for what I'm doing now. I love the agency. And I can't believe I had the opportunity to serve there for as long as I did.
Well, I definitely appreciate you sharing that. And I always like to ask my guest, I like to ask everybody, what they're reading or, particular books that have influenced them. Because again, I see it as an opportunity to experience the world through someone else's eyes. If you want to get to know someone, eat what they eat, read what they read, put yourself in their shoes. And if for no other reason, well, you might hear of something that you never even heard of before. So anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm actually reading a history of the women at CIA called The Sisterhood.
You can't leave it alone.
Yeah, I'm actually reading that. It's just fascinating to read about Virginia Hall and people like her. It's great to understand the women that preceded me at the CIA, and to read about women that I worked with. I mean, that's exciting. One of my dearest friends and mentors, Bonnie Hirschberg, is referred to in the book. And I thought, oh my God, Bonnie. So it's neat. It's very neat.
And the name of the book again is?
The Sisterhood, The History of Women at the CIA.
The Sisterhood.
Liza Mundy is the author, Mundy.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rodriguez, for taking time out of your day to share your experiences and expertise. And thank you to our audience for listening in. For those out there working tirelessly to inform our decision makers and without the benefit of public acknowledgement, please accept our gratitude for what you do to uphold the U.S. Constitution and serve the American public. As your host, Maurice Brungart, I welcome you to join us again next week, and that you invite others to also follow Brungart Law's Lagniappe, where we provide a little extra perspective because the devil is always in the details. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Maurice.